Welcome! You're listening to the Uncharted Lancaster podcast, where we explore the hidden histories, forgotten places, and long-buried secrets of Lancaster County. Using modern digital storytelling tools, each episode brings a new piece of local lore to life, revealing the strange, the surprising, and the stories history left behind. Let's begin.
Imagine you are Thomas Edison. Like, you are arguably the most famous inventor on Earth, right?
Oh, absolutely. The Wizard of Menlo Park.
Exactly. You are the mind bringing incandescent light to a world that has, only ever really known the flickering glow of gas lamps and candles.
Right. You are practically synonymous with progress at that point.
Yeah, but tonight, you aren't in some pristine laboratory or a wealthy financier's parlor.
No.
You are sitting on a raw, uneven dirt floor in a pitch black, completely windowless iron box.
Just let that sink in for a second.
I mean, it's wild. You are breathing in this gag-inducing stench of a wooden toilet bucket that frankly hasn't been emptied. And directly above your head, like separated only by a ceiling and some floorboards, a bustling, cheerful farmer's market is operating in the sunlight.
Right, people are literally buying pies above you.
Yeah. So welcome to this deep dive, because today we are unpacking exactly how that happened.
It is such a staggering scenario to picture, and yet it is an entirely true piece of history. Because, when we look at historical spaces, we tend to categorize them really neatly.
Oh, totally. Like, it's either the good building or the bad building.
Exactly. A building is either a charming civic center or it's a grim site of punishment. You don't really mix the two. But the structure we are exploring today, it completely shatters that binary.
It really does. So, okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to completely dismantle that idyllic, old-timey postcard image you might have of the 19th century farmer's market.
Yeah, we're tearing that down today.
We are taking you into the Columbia Market House in Pennsylvania to explore this bizarre, basically architectural double life.
It's like two different worlds in one footprint.
Right. We're going to break down the massive, frankly, over-engineered structure above ground, and then we're going to descend into the brutal subterranean lockup that operated right beneath the feet of everyday shoppers.
I will look at the famous figures forced into its depths, too.
Like Edison. And eventually we'll get into the unexplainable phenomena that people claim still echo in those walls today.
So to really grasp how a place like this comes to exist, we have to orient ourselves in time and space first.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Right, so we are setting the stage in the 1860s. The town is Columbia, Pennsylvania, which is located right on the banks of the Susquehanna River in Lancaster County.
And this wasn't just some sleepy pastoral village, right? Like, this wasn't just a couple of farmhouses.
Not at all. No, the 1860s in Columbia was an era defined by just explosive, often really chaotic industrial growth.
Right, because of the river.
The river trade was massive, yeah. But more importantly, you had the railroad. Columbia was this critical nexus point for transportation and industry.
So it was booming.
It was a boom town in every sense of the word. Swollen with wealth, transient workers, and just a lot of ambition. And that ambition crystallized into the structure that replaced their old 1814 open-air market.
Yeah, let's get into the mindset of this town, because honestly, the way a community builds its civic centers tells you exactly how it views itself.
Oh, 100%.
Right. So in 1869, Columbia decides an open-air market just isn't good enough anymore. They want a marvel. They want a monument to their own prosperity.
They want to just show off.
Basically. So they embark on this massive construction project. It takes 13 months, and it opens in September of 1869. And the sheer scale of what they built, it's difficult to wrap your head around for a local municipal building of that era.
Well, the physical footprint alone is staggering. We are talking about a continuous enclosed structure that is 118 feet long.
Wow.
And 80 feet wide.
Which, just to put that into a modern perspective for you listening, that is essentially the size of a professional basketball court.
Right.
But entirely enclosed in massive, heavy masonry.
Precisely. And it was designed to house 180 individual indoor vendor stalls.
That is so many stalls.
Yeah, alongside an additional 37 outdoor stalls that were sheltered under this massive projecting roof overhang.
So it was huge.
Right. And architecturally, it is this fascinating hybrid. If you look at the surviving structures and, the historical plans, it features a blend of Federal and Greek revival styles.
Okay, so break those styles down for me. Like, what does that actually look like to someone walking down the street in 1869?
Sure. So federal-style architecture is typically characterized by extreme symmetry.
Okay.
You have flat brick facades and this sense of understated geometric elegance.
Very clean lines.
Exactly. And then the Greek Revival brings in those elements of monumental scale. Think of large, imposing entrances and a real focus on civic grandeur.
Like columns and arches.
Right. So the Market House exterior presents this magnificent red brick edifice. It has tall, elegant, arched windows that just allow light to flood the interior, and these massive red double doors that open directly onto the street level.
It sounds beautiful.
It does. But what makes it unique is that those elegant classical styles are fused with this heavy, undeniable industrial bulk.
Right.
Like, it doesn't look like a delicate civic pavilion. It looks like a fortress of commerce.
And that industrial bulk makes perfect sense when you look at the man who was actually pulling the strings on this project.
Yes, Robert Crane.
Right. This is where the origins of this building turn from a standard history lesson into like something out of a movie.
It really does.
Because the Market House Council, the group dictating how this thing was going to be built, was led by Crane.
And Robert Crane is the key to understanding the sheer physical force of this building. Because Crane was not an architect.
Right.
He wasn't a civic planner. He wasn't a politician by trade. He was the superintendent for the Reading and Columbia Railroad.
Literally a railroad engineer.
He was fundamentally a railroad engineer.
He builds things meant to carry thousands of tons of screaming iron and coal.
Exactly. And beyond his profession, he was a man defined by a very specific, deeply pragmatic psychological profile. And that was forged during the Civil War.
Yeah, this is the context that absolutely blew my mind when I was looking at the sources. Walk us through what happened in 1863 with Crane.
All right, so just 5 years before this market house was commissioned, in June of 1863, Crane was faced with a catastrophic crisis. Confederate forces, specifically General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, were pushing aggressively into Union territory.
They were moving fast.
Very fast. And they were marching toward the Susquehanna River. Crossing that river at Columbia was a massive strategic objective for them.
Because if they
crossed, they had a direct path to threaten Philadelphia, or they could double back to Harrisburg. The only thing standing in their way was the Columbia-Wrightsville Bridge, which was an absolutely vital piece of infrastructure.
It's the covered wooden bridge, right?
Yes, and it was over a mile long. A massive structure spanning the river.
A mile-long covered bridge. The engineering alone to build that back then is incredible.
Oh, a total marvel. But Robert Crane recognized that the Union militia was vastly outnumbered and outgunned by the advancing Confederate troops.
They couldn't hold it.
No. He realized that holding the bridge was impossible. So to stop the Confederate advance, Crane made a decision that most people couldn't even fathom making about their own town's infrastructure.
Wait, he didn't just barricade it, right?
He didn't just order the bridge barricaded. He personally ensured the total destruction of it.
Wow.
He was the one who applied the torch to the mile-long bridge, burning it entirely to the waterline.
He just scorched earth, an architectural marvel to save the county. I mean, I want to pause and really think about the psychology of a man who can do that.
It takes a certain kind of mind.
Yeah. You are looking at a mile-long bridge, basically the lifeblood of your local economy, and you have the absolute mental fortitude to say the only logical solution is to reduce it to ash.
Right, no hesitation.
That requires a cold, calculating, intensely pragmatic brain. You do what works, regardless of the aesthetic or emotional cost. And then, and this is the crazy part, 5 years later, the town turns to this exact same scorched earth wartime tactician and says, hey, can you oversee the construction of our new building where people will buy cabbages and fresh pies?
It's a brilliant juxtaposition.
Yeah.
I mean, you are essentially asking an aerospace engineer to build a local grocery store.
Yes, that is the perfect analogy.
The inevitable result is an absolute masterpiece of over-engineering. Crane's influence is woven into the very skeleton of the Columbia Market House.
Right down to the roof.
Yes. When the architects Isaac Hobbs and Samuel Sloan and the builder Michael Liffart executed the design, they didn't use standard civic roofing techniques.
No, they didn't.
They used a structural system that Crane would have been intimately familiar with from his railroad days.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the interior details of this space and the source material, and the first thing that strikes you is the absolute emptiness of the floor plan.
It's totally open.
Right. You have this massive 80-foot wide space, and there are 0 support columns in the middle, like nothing blocking the aisles. You just look up, and the ceiling is this vast, soaring, complex web of cross-brace wood beams and thick iron rods.
And what's fascinating here is that what you're looking at up there are called Howe trusses. And this is the mechanical genius of the building.
Okay, high trusses.
Right. In the 1860s, a Howe truss was not something you typically put on a municipal market.
Where do they usually go?
Well, it was a revolutionary design patented by William Howe in 1840, and it was specifically designed for heavy-duty railroad bridges.
Ah, so Crane literally put a railroad bridge roof over a market.
They absolutely did.
Okay, I am not an engineer.
Yeah.
Break down the physics of a Howe truss for me. Like, why is it so special, and how does it hold up a roof that massive without any pillars underneath?
So the brilliance of the Howe truss lies in how it manages two competing physical forces, right? Compression and tension. Imagine an incredibly heavy roof trying to sag in the middle. The Howe truss uses heavy diagonal timber beams to handle the compression. That's the pushing force of the weight.
So the wood takes the push?
Exactly. But the true innovation was the introduction of vertical iron tension rods. These rods handle the pulling force.
Okay, so they mixed wood and iron to do 2 different jobs.
Exactly. Wood is great at not being squished, but iron is fantastic at not being pulled apart.
That makes sense.
And what made it perfect for railroads and for Crane's market house is that these vertical iron rods were threaded at the ends and fitted with nuts.
Wait, like giant screws?
Yes. This meant that if the massive roof ever started to sag slightly, or if the wood shrank over time as it dried, workers could simply climb up and tighten the nuts on the iron rods with a massive wrench.
No way.
Yeah, they were literally pulling the structure back into rigid alignment.
That is fascinating. So they basically took the structural skeleton of a heavy-duty railroad bridge, arched it over, and slapped a roof on it just to shelter farmers.
It's incredibly overbuilt.
It gave them 180 stalls of totally unobstructed foot traffic. It's basically industrial-grade infrastructure masquerading as civic architecture.
It is a stunning, highly practical solution. But, naturally, when you decide to build a massive brick, Howe truss-supported fortress in the center of town,
The economics get complicated.
very.
Yeah.
The economics of it become incredibly complex.
Yeah, let's talk about the money, because there is a serious financial anomaly here. Most of the massive, impressive markets built in Pennsylvania around this time, the mid to late 19th century, they were not built by the government, right?
Correct. The standard model was private investment.
Like private corporations.
Exactly. A group of wealthy merchants or local businessmen would form a corporation, pool their capital, build a magnificent market house, and then operate it as a for-profit enterprise. They'd make their money by renting out the stalls to individual farmers.
But Columbia didn't do that.
No, Columbia took a completely different route. The Columbia Market House was entirely funded by the Columbia Borough. It was a municipal project from day one.
Which means municipal contracts. And if there is one thing that transcends time, whether it's 1869 or 2026, it is the absolute certainty of scope creep on a government contract.
Oh, the numbers are wonderfully telling.
Right. The borough initially awarded the building contract to Michael Leifard, and they agreed upon what they considered a very reasonable fixed sum of $17,000 for the entire build.
Just $17,000.
Which, to give you a sense of scale, $17,000 in 1869 translates to roughly $250,000 today in pure inflation.
Right.
But in terms of purchasing power for labor and raw materials like iron and brick back then, it was a massive, massive civic investment.
A fortune. But as the massive bridge trusses went up and the red brick facade was laid, unexpected changes began to plague the project.
Shocker.
Right. Borough kept making allowances for extra work, modifications to the foundation, little tweaks to the design.
And what was the final bill?
By the time the doors opened, the final bill had ballooned to exactly $19,656.77.
They missed the budget by nearly 15%. I love that. Some things just never change.
Never.
But, despite the budget overruns, they got what they paid for. They got their marvel.
They absolutely did.
The accounts of the era describe it beautifully, like a lively scramble of petticoats and toff hats, merchants haggling over homegrown products, people traveling from neighboring counties just to participate in the commerce. It was the pulsing, wholesome heartbeat of the town.
Above ground.
Right, above ground. Because here is where the story shifts from civic pride into something profoundly dark.
Yeah, this is the pivot.
While the citizens were walking across those beautiful, swept brick floors, bathes in the light of those tall arched windows, a brutal, unforgiving reality existed literally inches beneath their feet.
Because the town of Columbia was deeply practical. They didn't just build a new market, they built it on the exact footprint of the old 1814 market.
To save space.
And money. And in doing so, they inherited the basement. Decades earlier, around 1836, the borough had decided to tear down an old oak-planked lockup they had been using for criminals. To centralize operations, they converted the underground foundation of the market into the new municipal jail.
Wait, so they spent $19,000 building this aerospace-grade grocery store up top, but they didn't bother to build a new jail.
Why build a new one when you have a perfectly terrifying basement?
They just kept using the subterranean crypt they already had.
Exactly. It was a completely bifurcated building, the architecture of commerce above and the architecture of punishment below.
That is so grim.
And the physical layout of that subterranean space is purposefully designed to break the human spirit.
Okay, let's trace the physical journey into this space, because I want to map out exactly how terrifying this is.
Please do.
So, on the south side of the massive market house, along a side street called Avenue EI, there is an entrance. You wouldn't even notice it if you weren't looking for it.
It's very unassuming.
Yeah, it's this short, steep stairwell cut into the concrete and stone, leading below street level. You walk down these steps, and you are confronted by a door.
A very specific kind of door.
Yes. It is a thick, solid wood slab painted a deep, flat, matte red. Above it is a barred transom, basically a small iron cage, letting whatever meager air exists pass through.
Right.
But the detail that instantly signals the horror of the space is what is missing from that red door.
Tell them what's missing.
There is no handle. There is no doorknob. There is no knocker. There is no window to see who is on the other side.
It is a completely flush surface facing the outside world.
I really want to dig into the psychology of that for a second. Think about what a door represents, right?
Agency.
Exactly. A door with a handle implies transition. It implies you have the agency to turn the knob and change your environment. When a prisoner is marched down those stairs and faced with a flat slab of redwood that they physically cannot interact with, it is a psychological airlock.
That's a great way to put it.
It communicates, before you even enter, that you are no longer an active participant in your own life. You are a captive object. You do not enter, you are deposited.
That is precisely the function of Victorian-era penal architecture.
Yeah.
The psychological subjugation begins before you even see the cells.
Right.
It strips away your autonomy entirely. And when the guard finally unlocks that red door from the outside and pushes it open, you step into a space that functions exactly like a catacomb.
So you walk into this small, tight vestibule, and the first thing you notice is the floor. It isn't solid concrete or smoothly paved stone.
No, it's dirt and brick.
Yeah, it is made of loose bricks laid in the earth. They shift, grind, and clack against each other under your boots. It's an unstable footing.
So you immediately feel off balance.
Instantly. And then you face a second door. This one is built into a massive, thick, arched stone hallway. This inner door has a tiny, heavily barred viewing window.
And once you are pushed through that second door, the true nature of the dungeon reveals itself. You are standing in a long, narrow corridor that runs the entire width of the market house.
The atmosphere is aggressively oppressive. Like, the walls are made of rough, completely uneven fieldstone.
They're painted, right.
Well, at some point in the past, someone tried to whitewash them. But years of dampness and subterranean moisture have left the white paint peeling, yellowed, and stained.
Very grim.
The ceiling is a low, tight, claustrophobic vaulted arch. There are thick white cobwebs draping from the stones, clinging to heavy iron chains that are inexplicably suspended from the ceiling.
Just hanging there.
Yeah. And we have to consider the lighting. Today, if you visit, there are electric lamps casting harsh shadows.
But imagine this space in the 1870s or 1880s.
Right.
The darkness would have been nearly absolute, perhaps broken only by the dim, smoky, flickering light of a single oil lantern carried by the constable.
And as you walk down this loose brick hallway, you look up and see something bizarre.
Oh, the rods.
Piercing right through the whitewashed stone ceiling and walls are these massive, thick iron rods. They jut into the space like spears.
These are the tension rods from the house trusses we talked about earlier.
Right. The engineering that holds up the bright, sunny market is literally stabbing down into the dungeon.
It is a constant physical reminder of the thousands of tons of brick, wood, and humanity pressing down directly on top of you.
Which is terrifying.
And lining the left side of this long corridor, the primary holding cells, there were 7 municipal jail cells in total down there.
Let's step inside one of these cells, because this isn't just a room with bars. This is an isolation box.
A vault.
The door to the cell alone is a piece of brutalist engineering. If you look at the edge of the door, it's not just a slab of wood. It is constructed of 3 separate, solid layers of thick wood sandwiched together.
That's incredibly heavy.
And then the entire door, inside and out, is sheathed in heavy, impenetrable sheet metal.
The hardware securing it is equally massive. It hangs on 2 gigantic iron strap hinges, and the lock mechanism is a heavy iron box bolted to the door. Not with modern screws, but with large, crude, square-headed iron bolts driven deep through the metal and the layered wood.
It's medieval, and there's a tiny opening in the door, but it's framed with wood that shows the scrape marks of a heavy sliding plate.
So they could cover it.
Right, a guard could walk by, slam that plate shut, and plunge the interior into total sensory-depriving darkness.
And when you are shoved through that heavy door, you actually have to step down, right?
Yes. The floor of the cell is lower than the brick hallway. You step down, and your boot doesn't hit stone or brick. It hits raw, uneven, damp dirt.
The dirt floor is the most crucial and horrific detail of the entire space. It fundamentally dictates the environment.
It's essentially a grave. You are standing in a vaulted room where every square inch of the walls and the ceiling has been covered in that same oppressive sheet metal. It's an iron box buried in the dirt.
Is there any light at all?
At the very back of the cell, there is a small opening to a light well that leads up to the sidewalk of 3rd Street above. But even that opening is choked off by a thick steel plate with only a few tiny holes punched through it.
So, no, not really. The sensory reality of this space is hard to overstate.
Yeah.
It is extreme sensory deprivation coupled with extreme sensory assault.
Let's break down exactly what happens to a human being locked in there. Let's walk through the mechanics of that experience.
Okay.
The cell contains absolutely zero plumbing, no sink, no toilet. You are given a simple, hard cot to sleep on, a wooden bench, a bucket of water for washing, and a second wooden bucket.
And that second bucket, as we can all surmise, is the toilet facility.
Yeah. So, imagine you're a prisoner. The heavy metal door slams shut, the slide is closed. You are sitting on a hard bench on a raw dirt floor in total suffocating darkness.
Just waiting.
Your eyes are straining, maybe picking up the faintest gray needle prick of light from the steel plate near the street level. The air in this metal-lined box is completely stagnant. The smell.
The smell.
The smell is an assault. You are breathing in the stench of your own unemptied waste bucket, mixing with the damp, moldy smell of the earth and the lingering sweat, vomit, and waste of every single desperate person who occupied that cell before you.
Because the dirt floor absorbs everything.
It never truly gets clean.
Physiologically, being trapped in a lightless environment with heavy, noxious odors induces extreme anxiety, disorientation, and a complete breakdown of the passage of time.
Your mind just goes.
Because your brain is starved of visual input, so it amplifies the auditory input.
And that brings us to the psychological torture of the space. Because you aren't hearing the drip of water in a distant cave.
No.
While you are sitting in the freezing dark, smelling human waste and damp earth, you can hear the muffled sounds of life directly above you.
From the market.
You can hear the heavy thud of boots on the floorboards. You can hear the dull hum of merchants laughing, shouting prices, the clatter of carts. You can hear normal, free society going about its cheerful Saturday morning, buying fresh bread and haggling over carrots, while you are buried alive in an iron box underneath their feet.
It is the ultimate architectural manifestation of being cast out from society.
Yeah.
You are literally placed beneath them. Close enough to hear them, but completely removed from their reality.
Which begs the obvious question. Why? Why did a town that was wealthy enough to build a $19,000 architectural marvel of a market need a medieval dungeon that looks like it belongs in the Spanish Inquisition?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, to understand the necessity of the dungeon, you have to understand the reality of a 19th century boomtown.
Okay, lay it out.
We touched on the industrial growth earlier, but let's look at the specific demographics that growth created. Columbia was the interchange. You had the canal systems, the river raftsmen bringing lumber down the Susquehanna, and the massive railroad yards.
A lot of heavy labor.
Exactly. This created a massive influx of transient physical laborers. Men who work incredibly dangerous, exhausting jobs, got paid in cash, and had nowhere to go but the local establishments.
And Columbia provided for those men. The historical records provide a statistic that is just absolutely staggering.
It really is.
In the mid to late 1800s, this single town boasted 23 dedicated bars and 28 hotels.
Stop and consider the density of that. 23 bars in a town of that era means that alcohol was one of the primary economic engines.
When you have thousands of transient workers, rivermen, railroad mechanics, laborers hitting 23 different bars on a Saturday night with fresh wages in their pockets, the result is completely predictable.
Absolute chaos.
You are going to have an astronomical level of public intoxication. You are going to have massive street brawls, rowdiness, vandalism, and just a general baseline of chaos that threatens the polite commerce the town relies on.
Right. The town leaders wanted the economic benefit of the transient workers, but they needed a mechanism to instantly suppress the inevitable disorder. They needed a way to sweep the streets clean.
And the broom they used to sweep those streets was a local legend named High Constable Campbell.
Yes. Constable Campbell is the embodiment of 19th century boomtown law enforcement.
Tell us about Campbell.
Well, he wasn't a modern police officer focused on community policing or rehabilitation.
Definitely not.
He was an enforcer. His singular mandate was maintaining order and keeping the gears of commerce free from friction.
He was a man deeply concerned with the logistics and efficiency of his job, and he had a very specific problem to solve.
The transport problem.
Right. Imagine Campbell has just waded into a bar fight. He has apprehended a guy who is fighting mad, screaming, spitting, and completely heavily intoxicated. Now, standard procedure would dictate that Campbell has to drag this violently struggling individual through the pristine new market house.
Past the well-to-do ladies buying their fruit.
Exactly. Down the stairs and into the holding cell.
Which is highly disruptive. It shatters the wholesome illusion of the market and disrupts business.
Campbell isn't going to ruin a Saturday market day just to lock up a drunk. So he bypasses the stairs entirely.
This is one of the most darkly pragmatic details I have ever heard.
Remember those light wells at the back of the cells that lead up to the street?
Right, the ones with the tiny holes.
Yeah. On the sidewalk of 3rd Street, right above the dungeon, there were half-moon iron grates covering those light wells.
Just on the normal sidewalk.
Right on the sidewalk. When Constable Campbell collared an unruly drunk, he wouldn't walk them to the door. He would drag them to the sidewalk, remove the heavy iron grate, and literally slide the prisoner feet first down the chute, dropping them straight into the dirt floor cell below.
The historical accounts note this with almost a sense of admiration for his efficiency.
They loved it.
They mention that this method saved Campbell many steps, allowing him to grab many more customers than would have otherwise been possible.
It is functionally a reverse human vending machine or a laundry chute for criminals.
That's exactly what it is.
You don't have to process them. You don't have to walk them down a hallway. You just pop the iron lid, drop the yelling drunk into the pitch black hole, slide the lid back over, and dust your hands off. Out of sight, immediately out of mind.
It perfectly encapsulates the era's approach to justice.
Right.
It was deeply unsentimental.
Very.
The dungeon wasn't a penitentiary meant to reform the soul. It was a holding tank.
Yeah.
The vast majority of the people dropped down that chute, the drunks, the brawlers, the petty thieves.
Then women too, right?
Yes. Women arrested for prostitution who were kept in a designated separate cell. But most were only held for a maximum of 3 days.
Just a weekend lockup.
The idea was simple. You throw them in the dark, let them sober up in the freezing damp, terrify them, and release them back onto the street once they are no longer a nuisance.
But because Columbia was such a major transit hub, it wasn't just nameless local warbirds who found themselves taking a ride down Constable Campbell's sidewalk chute.
Oh, no.
Some incredibly high-profile individuals crashed headfirst into Columbia's brand of justice.
The historical records detail at least 2 massively famous celebrity inmates who experienced the dirt floors of the Market House dungeon. And the first one is a true titan of 19th century culture.
John L. Sullivan.
The Boston Strong Boy.
Yes. For listeners who might not be steeped in the history of Victorian sports, John L. Sullivan's fame is hard to overstate.
He wasn't just a successful athlete. From 1882 to 1892, he was the heavyweight champion of the world. But more importantly, he was the last great champion of the bare-knuckle boxing era.
We have to explain the mechanics of bare-knuckle boxing because it contextualizes exactly how terrifying Sullivan was.
Please do.
This isn't modern boxing with padded gloves, 3-minute rounds, and a referee protecting the fighters. This was fought under the London prize ring rules.
Which were brutal.
2 men step into a ring pitched on the dirt. No gloves, just raw knuckles wrapped in tape. And there is no time limit.
None.
A round only ends when a man is knocked down or thrown to the ground. Then they have 30 seconds to rest, and they have to toe the scratch. Literally step up to a line drawn in the dirt and start punching again.
That is exhausting.
The fight only ends when a man is physically incapable of standing up. It was barbaric, grueling endurance combat.
So to survive and dominate that sport, Sullivan had to possess an almost inhuman level of pain tolerance, aggression, and physical power. He was a force of nature.
A literal giant.
And because of that, he became the first true sports superstar in America. He was arguably the catalyst for modern sports journalism. Newspapers realized that publishing dramatic, round-by-round accounts of Sullivan's brutal fights sold thousands of copies.
He was wealthy, universally recognized, and accustomed to doing whatever he pleased without consequence.
Until he went to Columbia.
Right, so you have this absolute mountain of a man, the most dangerous, toughest human being on the planet. And in 1893, he comes through Columbia for a boxing exhibition.
Okay.
After the exhibition, Sullivan decides to partake in Columbia's infamous hospitality. He hits the bars. And as the historical account gracefully phrases it, he gets roaring drunk.
And in 1890s Columbia, it simply did not matter if you were the heavyweight champion of the world. The law was the law. And the law was Constable Campbell.
I would give anything to witness that specific arrest.
Right.
Constable Campbell, a local lawman, looks at John L. Sullivan, a man who regularly beats other men unconscious with his bare hands for hours at a time, and says, "You've had enough, buddy." And down the chute he goes.
It's just unbelievable.
The heavyweight champion of the world spends the night sitting on the dirt floor in the pitch black, smelling the bucket. And the psychological impact it had on him is incredible.
There's documentation of this, right?
Yes. I want to highlight a specific newspaper article from the Lancaster New Era.
Lancaster, yes.
The Lancaster New Era, dated January 24th, 1894. This is a year after his trip down the chute. Sullivan returns to Columbia, and the newspaper explicitly notes his demeanor.
What did it say?
Quote, "His eye was clear and his walk was steady and sprightly. His general appearance is much better than a year ago."
It appears the Columbia lockup was the ultimate reality check.
I am absolutely suggesting that one single night in that sensory deprivation nightmare of a dungeon was a scared straight program for the toughest man alive.
It humbled him.
He realized there was a brutality in the world worse than a bare-knuckle ring, and it was a Columbia market house basement. He made a very conscious effort to ensure he was never, ever dropped down that chute again.
It is a phenomenal anecdote about how a space like that serves as an absolute equalizer.
Yeah.
No matter how big you are, the dark is the dark.
Exactly.
But the second celebrity inmate presents an even more profound, almost literary irony.
Oh, here's where it gets really interesting. If Sullivan represents the brutal physical past of the 19th century, the second inmate represents the incoming rush of the 20th century.
Because Constable Campbell didn't just arrest brawlers.
No.
He arrested the man who was actively inventing the modern world.
Thomas Alva Edison.
The Wizard of Menlo Park.
The man who gave us the incandescent light bulb, the phonograph, and the motion picture camera. How does one of the greatest minds in human history end up in a medieval dirt cellar?
To understand how Edison ended up there, we have to look at the state of technology and infrastructure at the turn of the century.
Okay.
Because Edison wasn't just working on light bulbs. He was a pioneer in early automotive technology, specifically electric cars.
Wait, electric cars back then?
Yes. At this point in time, automobiles were incredibly rare novelties. The roads were dirt or cobblestone, and they were designed exclusively for horse-drawn wagons, carriages, and pedestrians.
There were no traffic lights.
There was no standardized system of traffic laws, no speed limits, and no real understanding of how these new machines should integrate into society.
It was the Wild West of driving. The rules were entirely subjective. It was essentially up to whatever local constable happened to be standing on the street corner to decide what was safe.
And Constable Campbell, watching this newfangled machine tear down his streets, decided that the driver was an absolute menace to public safety.
He pulled him over?
Edison was pulled over and arrested for speeding.
And do we know how fast the great inventor was going?
He was allegedly traveling at a blistering 20 miles per hour.
20 miles per hour. I mean, on a road built for horses walking at 3 miles an hour, a heavy metal carriage silently flying by at 20 miles an hour probably looked like a missile.
It probably terrified the locals.
So Campbell pulls him over. He doesn't care who this guy is. He drags him down, locks the heavy iron strap door, slides the plate shut, and only later, presumably during questioning, realizes he has just imprisoned Thomas Edison.
The visual irony of this moment is spectacular.
It really is.
Think about what is happening in that cell. You have Thomas Edison, a man whose entire life's work is about illuminating the darkness, banishing the shadows with electricity, and pushing society into a high-tech future.
And he's in the dark.
He is sitting in total pitch-black darkness. He is locked behind massive iron bolts in a subterranean dungeon that functions mechanically and psychologically exactly like a 14th century oubliette.
He is trapped in the dark ages because the local civic infrastructure hadn't yet evolved to accommodate the speed of his own genius.
It's literally the collision of two centuries in one room. Edison fuming in the dark next to a wooden toilet bucket because he drove his electric car too fast.
It's incredible. But, eventually, that stark juxtaposition, the rapid technological and societal progress happening above ground, contrasted with the horrifying primitive squalor below it, became something the town could no longer justify.
The times were changing. The Victorian era was ending, and the progressive era was beginning.
Yeah.
Sensibilities regarding public health and penal reform were shifting dramatically.
So what was the breaking point?
The tipping point arrived in 1896. The dungeon received a very important and ultimately fatal visit. A candidate running for county government decided to tour the municipal facilities.
Big mistake.
He walked down that loose brick hallway, inhaled the stagnant, noxious air, looked into the ironclad cells with their dirt floors and waste buckets, and he was completely appalled.
I would hope so.
He took his outrage public, and he used a very specific, highly charged phrase to describe the Columbia lockup. He called it the Black Hole of Calcutta.
Now, why is that specific phrase so important? Why did it carry so much weight in 1896?
Because in the 19th century lexicon, there was no more damning comparison you could make.
What's the historical context?
The Black Hole of Calcutta refers to an infamous historical event from 1756. During a conflict in India, the Nawab of Bengal captured a British garrison at Fort William. He forced a large number of British prisoners of war into a tiny, poorly ventilated dungeon overnight.
Oh, wow.
The conditions were so suffocating, the heat and crush of bodies so intense, that by morning, a significant number of the prisoners had died from heat exhaustion and suffocation.
That's horrifying.
Whether the historical accounts of the death toll were exaggerated or not, the phrase Black Hole of Calcutta burned itself into the global consciousness. By 1896, it was the ultimate shorthand for unspeakable cruelty, suffocating squalor, and administrative barbarism.
So by comparing a Pennsylvania municipal jail to a notorious 18th century death trap, this politician essentially dropped a PR nightmare on the Columbia borough.
Exactly. It was a massive political indictment. It framed the town's leaders not as pragmatic managers, but as cruel anachronists.
They had to act.
That political pressure, combined with the growing influence of public health standards, forced the hand of the local Board of Health. In the early 1900s, they officially condemned and closed the subterranean dungeon.
The era of the human laundry chute was permanently over.
Permanently.
But the physical space didn't cease to exist, right? The cells were still there in the basement. And the borough of Columbia, ever the pragmatic stewards of public property, found a new use for those condemned biohazardous iron boxes.
Yes.
And this detail, I am still genuinely reeling from this. I cannot express the level of profound disgust I have for this next historical fact.
It is a jarring pivot, certainly.
The Board of Health shuts down these cells because they are fundamentally unfit for human habitation. So what does the town do? The local farmers start using those exact same cells to store their fresh produce for the weekend market days above.
From a purely environmental standpoint, the basement offered a cool, dark, temperature-controlled environment. Conceptually, it functions exactly like a root cellar, which is how farmers preserve crops before refrigeration.
Conceptually, yes. But practically, it is a sanitation nightmare.
It is pretty bad.
Think about the mechanics of what we just discussed. You have a raw dirt floor. For over 60 years, the town's most violently intoxicated workers, bleeding bare-knuckle boxers, and terrified petty thieves were sweating, vomiting, and relieving themselves in wooden buckets that inevitably spilled
into the dirt.
That earth has absorbed decades of human waste and misery. It is practically a biohazard sponge. And now, the farmers are hauling down wooden crates and stacking the town's fresh cabbages, apples, and potatoes on that exact same dirt to keep them crisp for the ladies in the petticoats upstairs.
It is horrifying.
It's beyond horrifying.
It is deeply repulsive to modern sensibilities regarding cross-contamination and hygiene. But, it speaks volumes about the unsqueamish, hyper-practical mindset of the era. Space was a premium commodity. The market needed cold storage, and the dungeon was sitting empty. They simply disconnected the space's past from its present utility.
They just didn't care. Meanwhile, the need for a jail obviously didn't disappear just because the dungeon was repurposed for root vegetables. People didn't suddenly stop drinking in Columbia's 23 bars.
No, the infractions continued, but the methodology of punishment had to adapt to the new progressive standards. They simply moved the incarceration out of the subterranean earth and up onto the ground floor.
To the main level.
Eventually, 2 modern holding cells were constructed upstairs, integrated directly into a newer section of the market house building itself.
And these new upstairs cells were a massive technological and humanitarian upgrade. We're talking block walls instead of whitewashed fieldstone.
Right.
Modern steel doors with standard keyed jail locks instead of massive iron straps and square bolts. They had barred observation openings with hinged steel covers so the guards could monitor prisoners safely without opening the door.
And light, I assume?
Most importantly, they had actual windows with bars that allowed real sunlight and fresh air to circulate. But the most revealing detail is where the architects decided to place these new cells within the market house floor plan.
Where were they?
They built them immediately adjacent to the public bathrooms.
Which elegantly and permanently solved the problem of the wooden buckets.
Exactly. Since the new holding cells still weren't plumbed with their own internal sinks or toilets, whenever a prisoner needed to relieve themselves, the guard would simply unlock the door and walk them next door to the public facilities.
It was infinitely cleaner, brighter, and significantly more humane than dropping a man into a lightless metal box in the dirt.
So, the physical machinery of justice was brought up into the light. The living, breathing lawbreakers were given ventilation and access to basic plumbing. But according to the local lore, and according to the people who still work in and preserve that building today, the transition wasn't completely clean. The physical bodies were moved upstairs, but something else stayed behind.
We are transitioning now from the documented historical record into the realm of the unexplained. The physical buckets were removed, the iron doors were left open, but the echoes embedded in the architecture remained.
You cannot talk about the Columbia Market House dungeon without talking about the hauntings. It is almost a requirement of the human psyche.
Truly.
When you have a physical space with a past that dark, a space that acted as a pressure cooker for human misery, fear, and desperation for over half a century, it is entirely unsurprising that it becomes a focal point for supernatural claims.
It is a location heavily saturated with what paranormal researchers call residual energy.
Right. To explore this, we have to look at the experiences of Chris Vera. Chris Vera is an incredibly credible figure in this context.
He's with the Historical Society.
Yes, he is the president of the Columbia Historic Preservation Society. He is deeply involved in local history, chairing the Zion Hill Cemetery Restoration Project. He is a man who knows the empirical facts of the town intimately.
So he's not prone to exaggeration.
Not at all. He provides the historical tours of the dungeon, meaning he has spent countless hours down in that dark, damp brick hallway alone, and he has experienced the unexplainable down there firsthand.
He is not an amateur ghost hunter looking for thrills. He is a historian who encountered something that shattered his empirical understanding of the space. And the primary encounter he details is genuinely chilling because it completely subverts the standard ghost story tropes.
Right. He didn't see a translucent Victorian gentleman tipping a top hat or a glowing white orb.
No, nothing like that.
Vera shared a story about a time he was down in the dungeon hallway with his brother. They were standing on the loose bricks, and they witnessed a manifestation that sounds primal. They saw a black, completely amorphous mass.
A shadow.
It had no human shape, and this dark entity wasn't just floating passively in the air. It was physically interacting with the brutalist architecture.
In what way?
Vera describes watching this massive black shape crawl up the rough, whitewashed stone walls. It stretched itself across the low, vaulted ceiling. And then This dark mass began to actively advance down the narrow hallway, moving directly toward them with an unknown but clearly aggressive intent.
That is terrifying. It was an active, predatory manifestation.
The sheer intensity of that encounter, the oppressive weight of seeing something that fundamentally violates the laws of physics advancing on you in a claustrophobic tunnel, it was overwhelming. Vera and his brother didn't stay to investigate or try to communicate.
I wouldn't either.
They broke. They fled, running for the steep concrete stairs, scrambling back up through the red door and into the normal, rational world, seeking refuge from whatever was crawling along the ceiling.
This raises an important question, though, about why we attach these intense, visceral, and often violent supernatural narratives to places like this.
What do you mean?
What is it about the specific environment of the Columbia dungeon that breeds these encounters? We can look at it through two lenses. The first is psychological and physiological.
Okay, the brain playing tricks.
Right. The space itself is an engine for sensory distortion. When you are underground, surrounded by heavy iron, thick fieldstone, and damp earth, the acoustics are bizarre. The lighting casts unnatural shadows. The brain, deprived of normal stimuli, begins to actively seek patterns, sometimes generating them out of fear. It plays tricks on the eyes.
Right. The environment primes you to be terrified. But what about the second lens?
The second lens is the stone tape theory. This is a concept in paranormal research suggesting that extreme emotional energy, terror, rage, absolute despair can actually be recorded by the physical environment.
Oh, like the building soaks it up.
Exactly. Proponents of this theory argue that certain geological materials like quartz in the fieldstone or the iron in the massive door straps and how truss rods act almost like magnetic audio tape. The trauma of the prisoners who suffered in those dirt floor cells for decades was imprinted onto the structure itself.
And it plays back.
And under certain conditions, the building essentially hits play, replaying those trapped, chaotic energies. It isn't a conscious spirit. It's a recording of an emotion. A black mass of residual suffering.
That makes perfect sense given the sheer volume of misery compressed into that tiny footprint. But the lore of the market house isn't just about amorphous blobs of energy. Some of the spectral residents down there are highly defined. They have identities and they have eternal routines.
Right. The local legends identify several specific recurring spirits.
The ghost that gets mentioned the most frequently by visitors and tour guides is a spirit known simply as Andrew.
Andrew.
According to the accounts, Andrew is eternally pacing the length of the dungeon. But he isn't walking down the brick hallway like a normal person. He paces through the solid stone walls themselves.
Just phasing through the stone.
He is a restless, repeating loop. Nobody seems to know exactly who Andrew was in life, what his crime was, or why he is fundamentally tethered to that basement. He is an enigmatic, enduring presence that just continues to walk his invisible path.
So Andrew seems to be a residual haunting. A playback. But there is another figure, one identified by a local psychic who investigated the dark cells, that presents a much darker, more interactive narrative. A spirit known as Big John.
Big John.
The legend of Big John adds a layer of violent intrigue that perfectly matches the brutal hardware of the doors. The story states that Big John was a prisoner who did not survive his 3-day hold.
He died down there.
He didn't die of a fever or the damp conditions. He met a brutal, violent end inside his cell. He was murdered by unknown assailants while locked in the dark.
Wow.
And because of that sudden, violent betrayal, his spirit is trapped. He is said to linger in the pitch black of the cells, perpetually searching the dirt floors for the men who killed him. He is fueled by unfinished business and vengeance. It is the classic vengeful ghost archetype, perfectly adapted to the environment of an ironclad room. It gives a face and a motive to the oppressive feeling of the basement. But what makes the supernatural ecosystem of the Columbia Market House truly fascinating is that it isn't entirely confined to the violent, masculine energy of the dungeon. There's the sharp contrast just outside the walls.
Yeah, right outside the heavy red door, out in the alleyway that runs alongside the market, people frequently report a completely different type of apparition.
A little girl.
They report seeing the spirit of a little girl, and her energy is entirely divorced from the terror of Big John or the Black Mass. She isn't aggressive or terrifying. She's described as a shy, melancholic spirit who quietly wanders the alleyway.
Does she interact with people?
If a living person notices her and tries to approach her to see if she's lost, she doesn't attack. She simply fades away or disappears around the corner of the brickwork.
It creates a brilliant supernatural juxtaposition. Deep in the earth, you have the heavy, violent, aggressive residual trauma of adult men trapped in the dark. And just above ground in the open air of the alley, you have the fleeting, innocent, melancholic spirit of a child. The building seems to attract and hold on to a wide spectrum of human echoes.
So we have explored the absolute extremes of this structure. We've looked up at the heights of Robert Crane's magnificent Howe trusses, and we've stared down into the depths of the dirt floor isolation cells. We've met the bare-knuckle champions, the speeding inventors, the pragmatic constables, and the vengeful spirits.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Which brings us finally back up those steep concrete stairs, through the red door, and into the light of the present day.
To examine what this space, with all its heavy history, has evolved into today.
Today is Monday, May 4th, 2026. If you travel to 15S 3rd Street in Columbia, Lancaster County, you will not find a monument to misery or a condemned biohazard. You will find a building that has been completely reimagined and revitalized.
It's beautiful now.
The Columbia Market House is a thriving, vital centerpiece of the community. It operates as a year-round farmers market. Every Saturday from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., those massive red double doors are thrown open.
Just like they intended in 1869.
Exactly. You can walk in under those breathtaking 1860s trusses and participate in exactly what the building was originally designed for. You can buy farm-fresh produce, artisanal baked goods, locally sourced meats, handmade crafts, and candy.
There's a full restaurant operating inside the space, too.
They even host private events. People book the market house for their wedding rehearsal dinners and receptions.
I want you to truly visualize that. Imagine attending a joyous, beautifully catered wedding rehearsal dinner. People are laughing, drinking champagne, dancing on the swept brick floors.
It sounds lovely.
And they are doing all of this directly on top of the exact geographic coordinates where John L. Sullivan sat shivering in the dark and where Thomas Edison fumed next to a waste bucket.
It is the ultimate expression of duality. So what does this all mean? How do we reconcile the bright, cheerful community hub of today with the brutal, windowless iron boxes that physically still exist in the basement right now?
It's a tough balance.
It means that a single building can serve the absolute highest ideals of community connection and the absolute lowest, most pragmatic demands of boomtown justice simultaneously.
It offers a profound lesson about the nature of history and the spaces we inhabit. History is not a single, cleanly written narrative. When you stand in a historical space, you are standing on tightly compressed layers of opposing human experiences.
That's beautifully said.
The joy and the suffering occupy the exact same square footage, just separated by an inch of floorboard and a few decades of time.
And that is the thought we want to leave you with today. We want to thank you for bringing this incredible stack of sources to our attention. Exploring the architecture, the history, and the lore of this building has been a phenomenal journey.
It certainly changes how you interact with the built environment around you.
The next time you visit a cheerful historic location, maybe you're buying a fresh, warm pastry at a weekend farmer's market, or you're attending a party in a beautifully restored brick building with massive arched windows, take a moment, pause.
Look down.
Look down at your feet. Ask yourself, what forgotten histories, what brutal pragmatisms, or what trapped echoes of the past might be buried just an inch below the floorboards you're standing on? You might be entirely surprised by what the earth beneath you is hiding.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Uncharted Lancaster podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating or review wherever you listen. It really helps more people discover the show. For more fascinating local history, visit unchartedlancaster.com. And if you'd like to go deeper, check out one of Adam Zern's books at unchartedlancaster.com/books. Until next time, keep exploring.